lot for joining us for another session of Beyond Code, where we try and talk to leaders of who are actually making a great impact across the companies that they currently work with. So today I have with me is Kingdom. To give you a quick background about Kingdom, is he's an engineer who has worked across multiple industries such as healthcare, education, fintech, and today he's right now a CTO of Beaks, which is a social networking site for pet parents and animal lovers. Also, to give you a complete anecdote that I spoken to Kingdom before hopping on this call, and I understood that he's a man who's actually wearing multiple hats. He's right now into a full-time job. He's pursuing his career in terms of higher studies and really making an impact across and really discovering him. And to be honest, trying to do a lot of things. I don't know how he's managing. And today we're gonna understand on how exactly he's uncovering and really, I don't know, how is his productive life, how exactly he's the productive guru in terms of whatever he does. Thanks a lot, Kingdom. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
Cool. Kingdom, would you mind giving a little bit of a walkthrough, a little bit about what I think people would actually be learning and would be interested in knowing a little bit of instances, right? What exactly drove you to this tech industry? I know you belong to Nigeria. You've grown and really come out and making an impact right in the UAE market right at this point of time. So can you give us a little bit of an examples, instances, how exactly you got basically exposed to a role that you currently have?
Yeah, well, that's fine. So I got in contact with computers after my secondary school. I think it's high school, maybe that's what you call it in India. So that was sometime in, I think, 2011. And it was basically someone telling me that there is this thing called programming that you could use to do some interesting things and tell the computer to like perform a certain way. I wasn't really sure what it was, but I think that sort of sparked my interest because I felt like if I can have this power, then that would be cool. So that eventually led me to studying computer science for my undergrad.
So while I understand that you've been exposed and you went into the game of computer and really discovered yourself, and today you are an engineer and a CTO. So I strongly feel Nigeria back then would have been a developing market, right? It would not have been that easy for you to really go out and really start the whole world of programming. What's your learning when you look back? Walk us through a little bit about your journey back then when you were a kid or you were just a budding engineer then.
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing is I started programming when I was in college, and it was with Java, just learning on the side, aside the college courses. And then when I finished my diploma, I decided to learn a bit more. So that was when I got into web development. I did some self-learning, picked up HTML and CSS and some JavaScript. And then, interestingly, I would say I got a very important catalyst in my career, and that was this program called Andela. I think it's a bit similar to what you guys are doing. So it's a platform that allows very talented engineers to come in, get trained to perform at an international standard, and then get placed in those international companies. And I joined them in 2017 after working professionally for some time. And I would say that was a very fortunate thing that happened to me. And it was also very much a catalyst for my career, because from then it sort of exposed me to what exactly is happening outside of Nigeria, since I was just operating within that scope. For the couple of years I was already working. But then having that sort of platform allowed me to see what's out there in other markets like North America, and that exposure then helped me to build the rest of my career so far.
So while I think platforms like Andela are really game changers, I think they've been very pioneer in the way they've made a huge impact across Africa overall, as far as we are aware. However, wanted to understand, whenever you were given that platform, there might have been certain challenges that you might have come across. Do you remember that when you decided to get on board with Andela or any other platform that you got in, or you, for example, got exposed to a team in North America to really start working? What was your fear when you started to work? How did you overcome that fear?
Yeah, well, I think definitely it was very interesting because, so just a bit of background again. When I finished college, when I finished like my diploma in 2014, I started working as a consultant my own startup. Actually, I was doing that before I finished school, starting in 2013. And then I later got a job where I worked as a systems integrator for a government consultancy. So I was working on like a state government project. And all of this was just like, I would say, a local champion kind of thing, where I am perceived to be skilled because there are just very few of us in my community or in the area where I'm operating. But then when it was time to join Andela, after applying, I figured out that I needed to write the algorithm test in Python, and I don't have any idea how Python works. And this was in 2016, around November. So I had to learn Python. It took me about 3 days, like day and night, trying to figure out what Python is. And at the same time, writing the algorithms because there is a deadline to this take-home test. And then I somehow succeeded and passed that stage, then got to Andela, did the boot camp, was like really crazy. But I think the moment I started working with the Andela partners in the US, it was crazy challenging because I haven't experienced anything like that before. It's like, how do you even behave? How do you talk? How do you communicate in a way that they can understand you? How do you make sure you're not feeling like an imposter because you are coming from nowhere and now you are working with people. Like my first placement, I was working with people from Microsoft, from like Apple, people that have been writing code professionally for maybe like 15, 20 years. And I'm, having to work with them in the same team and contribute ideas. It was a bit overwhelming at first, but, I think the platform Andela provided was really good, as it was not just about the technical skills. They tried to help a lot with, like things like the soft skills. How do you communicate effectively? How do you work in a remote setting so that you can, not just write code, but also be an effective team member, contribute ideas. I think that the platform was my savior, because if I was to take myself the way I was from my skills and experience point of view, and then just start working with a US company, I probably would have like failed very badly. So I think the support I got from that platform was really helpful.
Got it. On a lighter note, do your parents still understand what you actually do?
I think it's hard. Every time I have to figure out which example to give. Like sometimes I'm like, Mom, I build stuff like WhatsApp I used to make this call that we are doing now. Or maybe I say I'm building something like a bank app. I don't think, I know for sure my mom knows I'm an engineer and she's proud that I'm an engineer. I don't think she understands like the details. Same with my dad, but yeah, they have some idea, but I don't think they really understand very well.
We can absolutely correlate to that. I wanted to also go now deep in terms of why you've been working with, as you mentioned, with one of the giants across the world. You've also been a guy who's actually gone ahead and really built it and right from the scratch. You've gone ahead and really got inside startup organizations. I think you also worked on a very early stage food delivery app. So can you help us a little bit of an understanding, and what was your learning, if I would say that today, if you look back and say that, okay, if someone who's right now watching is an early stage career and really wants to go deeper in really working with early stage startups, really go and build it, what would be your advice? What would be your learning that you would like to share to them?
Well, I think one thing that stands out to me, something which I still value right now, is being very curious. I'm very curious. Like naturally, I want to learn anything. And if I think back to the time when my friend was telling me that there is this thing called programming, it was that curiosity, that spark of curiosity that made me to go to my dad and say, look at what my friend told me. I want to learn this thing. He has no idea what I'm talking about. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But somehow I was able to get him to take me to a nearby city and then go to a programming school. We figured out the cost was too much. So I came back, applied to study computer science instead of like medicine. I think that curiosity has been what has sort of helped me, throughout the journey. If anyone is starting the journey, I would say, just make sure you are very curious and you maintain that curiosity even when you've advanced in your career. And that curiosity also is what will help you to have the willingness to learn something new, and also be willing to share what you're learning. So at the earlier stage of my career, I used to speak a lot about what I'm doing. I used to write a lot. Anyone that came close to me in 2015, actually 2014, 2015, 2016, they would know for sure that I'm a programmer, because that's all that I talk about. Like, I just want everyone to know what I'm doing. I just want everyone to get excited about what I'm doing. And interestingly, two of my friends now are professional like software engineers because of that kind of, curiosity and my drive to tell everyone what I'm doing. I think that sort of helps you to build your early network too.
So that curiosity, I think, gets carried across, and a little bit of an understanding that I want to now go inside. Right now, you are basically building a startup in terms of a very interesting platform in terms of pets, right? So, what's your approach? How do you actually ensure that the tech that you are right now, in terms of software that you, the apps that or the platform that you're looking to build, how do you strategize in terms of getting the structure for these kind of applications that you're right now building?
So on the side, aside my full-time job, on the weekends I work on my personal startup Vix, and it's basically a platform that allows pet owners to connect with other pet lovers. So you're a pet owner, you got a cat or you got a dog or whatever pet, you can set up on the platform and then set up an account for yourself and your pets, and you can share, just like Instagram, you can share pictures, photos, and memories of your pets. So it's basically a social media platform for pet owners and pet lovers. Now, in terms of structure, I'm not sure exactly what you are looking to hear around that. Maybe make it more specific so I can give you the right context.
So it's more of, so let's assume that someone who's trying to develop an application, right? A similar application to you. So if you would say, what are the three must-haves that I need to do in terms of getting started, and what I need to look at in terms of ensuring scalability, ensuring robustness, what would be your advice then be?
Yeah, I think given that I love products and also love engineering, I think there are two points that I can two viewpoints that I would take. One is from the product side, the other one is from the engineering side. And for products, I would say you would have to be sure that it's something that someone out there wants. And so for us, it's about figuring out, would people really want to use this platform? They love to share their pet parenting journey on a platform like this. And when you figure that out and you figure out what your MVP should be, then the other thing would be, how do I use technology to help me to get to this end? So we figured out we wanted to build a mobile app that people can use to share these stories online. And then we decided, okay, this is the platform we wanted to use Flutter. And we need to write some backend services for it. So you have to figure out what the product is. That's my approach. Figure out what the product is, set out like the MVP. So there's a big idea, and then there is a small one that you can build at least in a couple of months. Then based on that small one, you can start saying, what technology or tools can help me to achieve this? And sometimes there is a risk of saying, I know tech and I love tech, and I make this mistake. I even made this mistake with Vix. And you want to build with the best tech, thinking for when 10 million people are using it at the same time. But it's not always the right approach to take, because you might spend a lot of time trying to build tech without going to the market first and testing the product idea.
So I think you're trying to balance the whole tech and business side of things. So
exactly.
That's where my follow-up questions comes across in this, right? Often we see engineers just lost on the engineering part. We see business leaders or product managers lost only the business use case part. As a person that who now tries to understand both, right? So you as you mentioned, you have a full-time job, you have a side hustle. In side hustle, you're the king to do everything. But I often in the full-time role, you might have to ensure that you understand both sides of coin. So what I wanted to also understand, following up, so whenever you are hiring, let's assume that tomorrow you go out and hire someone, what are your 3 or 4 matrices that you would see in that particular person to ensure that he actually fits the kind of responsibility that needs to be offered, or would be your ideal engineer?
So interestingly, I'm not building Vix alone. Like I've hired one engineer full time, and then right now we have one intern who's been working with us for almost a year. So it's not like it's like a solo effort. But then what I would say is, depending on the stage of the startup or the stage of your idea or your product, that's what would determine what kind of metrics you want to use for hiring. So I've done a lot of hiring. In Andela, I did like hundreds of interviews. At Lean here, where I work right now, I've done like a bunch of interviews for them. And so for every team and every stage of a startup or a company, a business, you would have to come up with a different set of metrics for hiring. So for instance, the initial person we hired at VIX was a mobile engineer. I haven't been working on mobile for like, I don't know, maybe since 2013. That was the last time I touched mobile. And since I was going to be building this on the side, it's not something I want to say, I want to learn everything first and then start building. It's going to slow us down. And so we decided to hire someone. But at first, I took like 2 weeks to learn some Flutter and then start writing the Flutter, like the main platform for the Flutter application, and then hired this guy to build on top of that. So at that stage, what I wanted was someone who knows Flutter like really well, and someone who can say, I can tell them, take this API documentation and then go do your thing. But let's say we move to a stage where we have like, I don't know, 1 million requests every 1 hour, for instance. And then I'm not going to look for just someone who can write Flutter. I'll start thinking of performance. I'll start thinking of, like experience in other native platforms, so that in case we are building something and it's not performant writing it on Flutter, we can just go one step down and write it in Kotlin or write it in Swift or Objective-C. And so at every stage, you would have to figure out like, what stage is the platform? What sort of skills do I need to survive at this stage? And then you hire for that. And when you get to the next level, you can change, you can change your hiring requirements, so you can get people that would help you to also move up to the next level.
So let's assume that tomorrow you go out, right? You have multiple roles. So what is the kind of skill that you would look at beyond just tech, for example, in a person that you would like to interview or you would like to hire? What are your skills beyond technology that you look at?
Yeah, one big thing for me is communication, because most times, at least for the most of my career, I've been working remotely. And that's one thing that have stood out to me. Like, you might not be very skilled technically. Of course, you need to know like what you're being paid for, but you might not be the most skilled in that sector. But if you know how to communicate very effectively, then it makes life easier. It makes life easier for the product manager, for the engineering manager, for whoever you're going to be working with. And that also means that if you're stuck, you can communicate that clearly so that someone knows how to help you. Or if you don't understand the product requirements, you won't just go off, oh, I know how to write React, and then you are building the whole React thing, to come back like 2 days later to realize you were building the wrong thing. And so for me, communication skills are like at the top of my list. And then something else would be someone who is able to take feedback, because as an engineer, even with my experience, I still make mistakes. I still have a lot of things to learn, both from product side, from business side, from engineering side. And so being able to, be humble enough to take feedback, it's been really, would I say, key to the progress I've made so far. So if I'm hiring, I always look for someone who is humble enough to take feedback, knowing that they don't know everything, and someone who is willing to say, I don't know this, and I'm going to go figure it out, or can you help me to figure this out? I think, yeah, soft skills like that are very important to me.
So you mentioned you've been a remote and you really worked remotely for the maximum part of your career, right? So when you work remotely, productivity often becomes extremely important. And we see a lot of articles, 10 ways to hack your productivity. And we see all these minimizing stuff right on your desk, what to keep, what not to keep when you're a remote worker. All these are part of the game, right? So if I go back and really understand, what's your productivity hack? You are right now a full-time person, a person who's having a side gig, who's a person who also is a student. So what's your productivity hack?
I think I'm not very big into like productivity tools, or like, being very meticulous with like 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. I have to wake up and take coffee. I think what I know is that I'm very disciplined with the way I treat my job. So for instance, when I speak with people who work remotely or people who do multiple things at the same time, the same thing stands out, and that is being able to effectively manage your schedule. So for me, I've got like, I would say 4 major things going on in my life aside my personal life. There is my full-time job at Lean. There is my like part-time CTO position at VIX, where I'm directing all of the engineering efforts, and there is also my master's program, which I'm about to finish this year. And then there is I have a wife and kids. So there is all of that. And for me, it's finding out, some sort of order of importance and putting each one at its own time. So for instance, today is Wednesday. I know I have to work at Lean. And so I would wake up at the right time, get to the office, do the hours I'm paid for, and then go home. Or maybe if I'm working from home, I know if I wake up at this time, I have to do Lean work at this time. And then after I close from Lean work, then I can think of anything else. So I think scheduling is very important. It's easy to just get lost with doing very little things like, oh, let me watch TV, or let me play some video games and stuff. I have time to relax, but if I don't plan my time properly, then those small things can interrupt the major things like my work or my schooling or my work ethics. So yeah, scheduling is very important, and I think that's the key.
So one of the larger challenges that I also wanted to understand your point on is that people always, so it's easier to, as per me, obviously you can correct me, when you're having a full-time job, you can look at a side hustle, because end of the day, you are with a mindset to really make out more money, or basically experience yourself. The larger challenge that you go back is learning in terms of a full-time course, right? That's a step back often people look at. What's been your major motivation that drives you to go back to the college days and really continue your learning even in a full-time role, with a complete degree at hand that you're looking at? So what was your trigger for that?
So for me, it was, I just felt like it would be cool to have a master's. I know that there's been times when I wanted to do some things, and maybe because of the bureaucracy for a country, or maybe because of the structure of a big company, they might say they need a degree. Right now, I've moved past that level. Like I can literally move to any country, and I can easily work with any company. But I just felt like maybe someday something comes up, and I'm saying, what if I had this? And so yeah, it's for me, it's also about the networking, because I'm doing a master's in computer science and international business. So I love computer science. I love programming. I love like software and all the things that goes into it. But I also love business. And it's another opportunity for me to sort of learn in a structured environment how to build and scale businesses. So it's like two things, not just the paper, but the paper is important to me, but also I'm getting like very, very, very valuable information on how to like build my career. There's also the networking. In my school, we've got like students from multiple nationalities, and all of these guys are now part of my network. So it means I now have people who are doing the same thing that I'm doing, but living in different parts of the world. And because it's a postgraduate degree, these are people who sometimes they're accomplished. Like I've got people who have 25 plus years experience in software development, some of them in like business development, some of them in whatever specialization that they take. And all of us are in the same class, all of us are learning together. And I feel that's a very strong thing to get out of any school. Like the networking is really key.
Awesome. While you've spoken a lot about the good days, right? You've been fortunate enough to go out, come out of Nigeria, get exposed to some of the best companies out of the world. There would have been some of the bad days as well. So some of the challenges. What's your can you walk us through an instance really that was something? It was a mishap in terms of your code. Your code got lost, or some kind of a mishap, and how did you handle that situation?
Well, I think any engineer who has like worked in live systems knows that there's something must go wrong somehow. I've had multiple incidents over the course of my career. One of them, when I was working with a company in the UK, I wrote a script that was supposed to be a very simple script to just update, take data from one microservice, write that into storage in another microservice. And then I didn't even properly test. I trusted my code, and then I ran the script. Like everything worked well, but then it exposed our database URL, production database URL, to a third-party provider that we're using. And it was crazy. Like it was crazy because if not for some of the security things we had in place, like we had the database stored in a virtual private network, and so like if your IP address is not well listed, then you can't even access the data. But that was like a crazy incident because it could mean, you know, a lot of loss for the company if our data gets leaked. And this is a company operating in the EU, you know, with the very strict data regulations in the EU. It's something like that was really crazy. But I think the biggest learning for me from every incident I've experienced is, for one thing, I never want to be, you know, too relaxed, thinking that I've got all the skills and experience, and now I can just, you know, forget about the processes and do things, you know, the way I want to do them, because I think I know what I'm doing. I'm always questioning myself. Like if I make a PR, most times I would take, actually all the time, I would take, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes, sometimes more, sitting down and reviewing my own PR. And then when I'm okay with it, when I'm happy with what I've, you know, all the code changes that I've made, then I can open it up for any other person to review. And so there's that constant questioning that I have to do. Like, am I sure I'm doing the right thing? Is there any way I can get this thing done in a better way, you know, in a more optimized way, in a more secure way? And there's also the fact that there's a humbling effect from handling incidents. Like it just tells you that you're not perfect. Like you can make mistakes, and it's okay to accept that, because if not, then you become very frustrated. Like, you know, you go home sad, thinking that, you know, maybe this is the end of my career. I'm not even sure I'm good at what I'm doing. But these things happen even to the best of us. So yeah, that's the second thing. I guess the third thing would be always looking for ways to improve something. So if an incident happens, the question is, what can we learn from this incident? What are the action plans? What are we taking away so that we don't have this happening again? And there is a skill that comes from having incidents. It's not a good thing to have incidents, but they always happen. And there is a skill that you take away from it. You learn how to, you know, look at something bad and not just think of it from the bad light, but instead think, now that this has happened and I've admitted that it has happened, how can we make it better so that it doesn't happen the next time? I guess, yeah, those three things, you know, questioning my work, not thinking I'm an ultimate engineer that wouldn't make any mistake. You know, always looking at things from, I think the second thing I mentioned was, I can't remember, but the third thing I mentioned was just looking at things from a positive light. Like if something bad has happened, then how can you take something away from this and apply it? So those are sort of things that I've learned from some of these incidents over the years.
Interesting. So how did you? I think you mentioned about some kind of a, while you've learned, what was your way if someone right now gets into that situation? How do you think someone handles? Does he take a step back? What was your approach? Did you follow in kind of a meditation to really calm yourself down? What was your process then on such crisis situations?
Yeah. Well, it's nerve-wracking. Like it's nerve-wracking. Like you are just like shaking. You don't know if you're going to survive this day. But I think the best thing I found that helps is to agree that this is the reality. You know, like let's say I broke production, I need to tell myself like, you broke production, and that is it. It's not going to change. And then the next question is, what can I do to stop the effect that this breakage has caused? And most times it will be just reverting the code. And then the next one is, you know, how could I have avoided this? And what do I want to do going forward so I can avoid this? I think for me, there is no like you sit down and try to calm yourself down and meditate. It's just like agreeing that this is the reality, something is breaking, communicating that immediately and saying, hey, I think I broke production, I'm investigating, and then always communicating back and forth with the appropriate stakeholders to say, this is where we are in the investigation. This is what I found so far. This is what I think has caused it. And also prioritizing rollback so that you don't let the issue linger for too long.
Coming to another question that I have, obviously, you are right now, as you mentioned, are in a lot of critical decision making. I strongly feel that since you are into hiring, since you are into becoming a CTO at your level, you take a lot of this critical decisions across, right? In terms of a lot of tech choices, business choices. So, do you follow some kind of a framework to address to them, or it's more that you go it by the guts? What's more important, logic, guts, or framework? Something that you follow?
For me, if it's about hiring, just to be sure, if it's about hiring, then it's a mix of both. Like it's a mix of three of them. Like let's say I'm trying to hire someone, right? I need to feel
Right.
that I can work with this person, and that's where your gut comes in. Like sometimes you can feel that you will not be able to work with someone just by interviewing them. And there's also the other part of business. Does this person meet the requirements of or the needs of the business at this time? And then finally, there's the technical part, right? So I think it's a combination of all of them. If you go for like, oh, the framework to hire someone without considering all of these other components, then there's going to be a problem. So yeah, for me, it's like balancing three of them: business, technical, and also just knowing that I can relate to this person and I think I can work with them.
Great, Kingdom. I'll just jump in and really get a couple of questions I've got from our basically from our viewers. So one of them has mentioned, I would like to know what it means to communicate effectively. If you can share with an example, this is Sagar asking you a question a little bit more about what exactly does a developer need to ensure that he's communicating effectively?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. For one thing, you need to speak clearly, and that might involve like training yourself to learn how to like enunciate properly. I don't speak like this a couple of years ago, and if you meet me like maybe 2 years time, my way of speaking might have changed because I'm always looking to improve the way I communicate. And so there is that effort that if English is not your first language and the companies you're working with are, English companies, then you need to learn the language properly. Try to improve your English speaking skills. And then in terms of communication in general, like language aside, you need to know what you want to get across, and then make that clear to your listener. So let me think of an example. So let's say you are building a product and you want to understand the product requirements clearly, right? Maybe they say, build, I don't know, there's a ticket that says add, okay, we are using Zoom, add recording, right? Add the feature to have recording. And you just read that, it's high level, it's not very detailed. For one thing, if you're going to communicate clearly, then you need to go further and say, what does this involve? What are the constraints? You do some early research and say, this is what I've found. These are all the possible things you can do. How can we streamline it to what we want at this time? And then let's say it's like a bug fix, for instance. It says this is the bug. It's clear. Sometimes you might need to ask, are there steps to reproduce this if those are not existing? If you're able to reproduce them and you find something new in the process, you need to communicate that this is something new you found. Sometimes it's not even about like talking with someone; it could be in writing. So basically, at every time if I'm working with an engineer, I want to know what they're doing. I want to understand what challenges they're facing. I want to be sure that we have aligned fully in what is on what he's working on. So if you're working on the feature, I want to be sure that you even understand what the feature is before you're working on it. So all of those are like some subtle things I would say come together to make up communicating clearly. So it's not just about speaking. Speaking is like the fundamental one, but you also need to be able to clearly tell your team what you are doing, when you are doing it, how you are doing it, if you are blocked or not. Like all of these different components are what comes together, and I can say that someone is communicating effectively.
So it's more about what you are feeling, how you are feeling, if that is said in the right way. I think communication solves it. Sagar has, I think, another follow-up question to this. He wants a couple of advice from you in terms of work-life balance. How do you actually build, right? You mentioned, I think you highlighted one of the aspects that you ensure is scheduling and not procrastinating, that you've already highlighted. Anything else you would like to add?
I would say rest. I try to sleep 7 to 8 hours every day. And sometimes it's like, I realize the days that I feel, oh, I want to stay up. Sometimes I do like long stretch where I go like 1 or 2 days and I'm sleeping like 5 hours or 4 hours. But I try on average to sleep for long, because when I sleep enough, when I get enough rest, then I'm able to perform properly the next day. So yeah, that's one. If you want to get a good balance on work and life, I think definitely take care of your health, get enough rest. In terms of, I don't know what else is asking about growth. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. I'll quickly ask one thing from Anjali. I think Anjali has a good, interesting question. She mentioned, how do you find a market fit how did you find a market fit for weeks? As a developer, what do you think it takes from a business perspective? I think you highlighted one aspect, that what's the need of the hour. You highlighted how exactly you wanted a Flutter guy to really go out and build, right? That's one of the ways. But
Yeah.
how did you look at in terms of beyond just that skill that you were looking at? What was your fit that you were looking for weeks?
So for product market fit, I would say it's a continuous thing. Like I wouldn't say we found product market fit. For a startup that is like a year old, like it's very difficult to say you found product market fit. But I would say what we are doing is that we are constantly iterating and testing different things to be sure of what the market signals are, and then we are building along that line. So for instance, we launched this tool. It's called the Cuteness Score, and it uses AI to generate some score for your pet and tells you like how cute the pet is. And we launched that on product hunt, got got a couple of users coming in and testing the product and sort of building the buzz from there. So I think it's a constant thing. We haven't really found product market fit. We know what our niche market is. We know who we are building for, but we need to slowly get to a point where we can say this is it, like we've nailed product market fit. But at this time, I would say it's a process of iterating with different ideas, seeing what the market says about the idea, and then going back and taking their feedback and trying to make progress with that.
Interesting. He had another question about developing the whole business side of things. How does a developer start thinking from the business side of things?
I'm not sure I have the answer specifically. What I can say is that I've always loved business. Like my parents have that background. My mom is a businesswoman, and I just enjoy that part of like work. I'm not all into the coding alone, and so I'm always thinking of the business. So that's one thing that I say is different in my case. But how can you develop that? Maybe try to take an interest in business, like maybe read business books. I've read a lot of business books, like lots of them. So yeah, if you're interested, maybe you want to read business books, or maybe you just want to watch YouTube videos on different people building products and companies and how they're doing it. Like most times in my free time, I'm watching there's this thing called MicroConf. It's like a bunch of founders who are doing SaaS products and building from 0 to 1 million, 3 million, whatever in annual revenue. And I just watch their stories because I love to hear such stories. And most times watching it puts me in that frame of mind, like, okay, these guys are doing it. They're doing really well. Like, how can I get VIX or whatever other idea I have to that point? And so it's that constantly feeding yourself with things that are about business, reading books or reading articles, or just like watching YouTube videos around business. So over time, you will be able to start thinking more from a business perspective. And so if you're working on a feature, you would start thinking, is this feature very important to the business? Will it help the business get revenue? If so, then you prioritize it more. If not, then you try to convince the product manager to deprioritize it so you can focus on something that can bring the revenue to the company. So yeah, I think it's
so that goes to a follow-up question. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just asking you very simple. I just wanted to understand. You mentioned you read a lot of books. So if I would ask you, what are your top books that you would recommend out to folks to really go out, or top podcasts or top series that you recommend that someone should not miss out at all?
Interesting. Let's see. So I've read a couple of books that I think are really interesting. One of them, I think the one on the top of my list would be The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Ben,
it's a book by
Ben.
What's called Anderson. So it's like really good book, like fantastic. I even wrote like a blog summarizing all of the most important points I found in the book. Because in terms of business, I'd like to read about a lot of things. So if you are looking at real estate, you might want to read something like Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's an oldie, but it's actually a classic. It's really nice. Let's see.
Any podcast?
In terms of series? Any podcast? In terms of podcast, I think my favorite one is not really about business. It's more about, actually it's a bit about business, but more about technical leadership. So, since the past couple of years that I started taking on more technical leadership roles, and then having to start my own startup and hiring people and having to lead them, I found this podcast is on Spotify. It's called, I think it's called Engineering Leadership or something. I can find the name and get it. Actually, I can check. But there's an engineering leadership podcast on Spotify that I listen to a lot. It's really good. I'm gonna find the name and then I'll send to you.
Got it. No worries. So I wanted to any other point you would like to add, or anything else you would like to share, Kingdom? That you
not sure. What I can say is that even at this time, there is that, from time to time there is that question of, am I sure I'm good? Like it's if you're starting out and you're thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. It's a feeling that lingers for the rest of your career. So from time to time that feeling comes up, and then you just have to remind yourself that you are good, you know what you're doing, and that's why they hired you, and that's why you're where you are. So you just have to keep pushing. I would say again, remain curious. For me, I found that curiosity has led me to learn a lot of different things. Like right now in my day job at Lean, for the past, I'd say 5 months, actually the whole of this year, I've been doing things that I'm unfamiliar with. So I've gone from writing Jenkins script and doing DevOps stuff to writing an Android SDK, to writing a Flutter SDK, to writing a React Native SDK. And all of this for me is just like about the curiosity. I don't know all of these languages and tools, but I know I want to get something done, and I'm just curious to ask the right questions and learn. So yeah, maintaining curiosity is very important to remain in this career path.
Awesome. I would really thank you, Kingdom, to really join us. But before you join, I wanted to summarize on what I learned today while having a conversation. To be very honest, I was very excited to hear the word networking from you. An engineer never ever thinks about networking. Often we always focus on what we understand and what we can learn in terms of our tech. So it's really great to hear someone trying to talk about and really advising engineers to network. So that was one of the biggest learning that I had. Apart from this, there were two things that you mentioned: curiosity. Curiosity is something that I honestly recommend and feel it will take people far than what they are at every stage of their life. And while you're curious, you can never be relaxed. That is where you've highlighted that if you are, it's really ecstatic and really do see that you're still not relaxed. You're out there learning, you're out there trying to build your own organization, you're out there really putting it across. And while you're doing all this, you're still managing a family. And I assume you also have pets. So before I let you go, I wanted to know a little bit about the pet that you have at your home. What's your favorite pet? What's his name or her name?
So right now, I don't have a pet because I moved countries, and I moved from Nigeria to Dubai, and my wife was heavily pregnant, so we had to leave our pets. we had to give it out to someone to care for the pet. But we had this dog called Snow. She was like really, really, really cute. Actually, let me see if I can find her. I will find her because she has an album. Let me just find one picture of her. That's Snow.
Awesome. That's no. Okay.
Yeah. So, and then quick one. The name of the podcast I was referring to is Developing Leadership. It's Developing Leadership's podcast on
right.
Yeah, on Spotify.
Cool.
All right.
Okay. How can someone connect with you, Kingdom?
I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest way to connect with me. I used to be very active on Twitter like some years back, but recently I literally cut off all of my social media except LinkedIn, if that's a social media, and then maybe YouTube. So I'm always active on YouTube and LinkedIn. So yeah, you can connect me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So folks, reach out to Kingdom. Happy to connect if you need to reach out. Thanks a lot, Kingdom, for joining us. I think it was a really interesting discussion here. Really love, again, going back to the terms that you use: curiosity, networking, and never be relaxed. That's his mantra, guys, out there, in terms of really leading your way, in terms of developing tech leadership. I think he's also shared important podcast that you should always go back and listen and read, obviously. Hard Things About Hard Things is an insanely great book that anyone can really hop on. Thanks a lot for Kingdom for those advices. Thanks a lot for joining us. It was an honor to host you today.
Thank you very much, Zane. Really happy to be here.
Thank you, Kingdom.
All right.
Bye.